You watch motivational videos every morning telling you to wake up earlier and work harder. You follow every piece of advice. You've become incredibly disciplined and highly productive. But what if that advice was specifically designed for people who'll never threaten the system? While you're being motivated, someone else is writing the laws. Guess who controls the game? Everyone believes self-discipline leads to wealth and financial freedom. What if I told you that discipline is deliberately sold to keep you busy? Most people spend decades perfecting morning routines while missing the game entirely. The system doesn't hide power because it's secret. It hides power because busy people don't question structures. You're taught that success comes from personal habits and character development. But what determines wealth at the highest levels versus what's marketed to ordinary people? If discipline actually built dynastic wealth, every hardworking person would be rich. Yet the wealthiest families pass fortunes across generations without exceptional discipline. How does that work in a meritocracy that supposedly rewards effort? Self-discipline is real, it matters. But it operates on individual scale while power operates on systemic scale. Discipline helps you optimize within existing rules. Power helps you write the rules themselves. Discipline makes you a productive employee. Power makes you control the market. These are fundamentally different games with different outcomes. If understanding why discipline advice saturates mass media while power mechanics stay hidden interests you, consider subscribing to Prof. Jiang Explained. This channel examines how systems distribute wealth through mechanisms rarely discussed publicly. Share this with someone grinding daily yet wondering why wealth stays distant. They need to see what game they're actually playing. The first mechanism is message targeting by class. Poor people receive endless content about discipline, habits, mindset, morning routines. Rich people receive different information entirely. They learn about regulatory capture, tax structures, political access, legal frameworks for wealth protection, same society, completely different education about how wealth works. This targeting isn't accidental, it's strategic. Keep poor people focused on individual optimization. Keep them believing that personal discipline determines outcomes. Meanwhile, wealthy families understand that systemic positioning matters infinitely more than personal habits. They know discipline is valuable, but they also know it's insufficient for building dynastic wealth. Think about financial advice marketed to different economic classes. Books for poor people focus on budgeting, saving, investing small amounts, building habits. Books for wealthy people focus on estate planning, tax minimization, regulatory navigation, political relationships. The content diverges completely because the games are completely different. The second mechanism is effort misdirection. Discipline culture directs enormous energy toward individual behavior modification. Wake earlier, exercise daily, journal consistently, track habits meticulously. This consumes attention completely. Hours spent perfecting routines. Mental energy devoted to self-optimization. All focused inward on personal control. This inward focus prevents outward analysis. When you're busy optimizing morning routines, you're not examining power structures. When you're tracking productivity metrics, you're not studying how wealth concentrates through legal mechanisms. Your attention gets captured by individual improvement while systemic questions remain unexamined. Wealthy individuals certainly have routines, but they don't confuse routines with wealth strategy. Their morning might include exercise and planning, but their wealth comes from owning assets that appreciate, from political relationships that secure advantages, from legal structures that protect accumulation. The routine supports the strategy. It doesn't replace it. The third mechanism is ideological reinforcement. Discipline ideology teaches that you control your destiny through personal choices, work harder, wake earlier, focus better. This feels empowering initially. It suggests you have agency, but it also makes failure feel like personal fault. If discipline determines success, then poverty must reflect insufficient discipline. This ideology serves power brilliantly. It redirects blame from systemic structures to individual character. Poor people blame themselves for not being disciplined enough. They never question whether discipline was sufficient strategy. Meanwhile, systemic advantages that concentrate wealth remain invisible, protected by narrative that attributes everything to personal merit. Consider how discipline advice handles structural barriers. If you mention that wealth requires capital, you're told to save harder. If you mention that monopolies dominate markets, you're told to work smarter. Every structural observation gets redirected to individual responsibility. The conversation never addresses actual mechanisms of wealth concentration. There's also the productivity trap. Discipline makes you more productive. Productivity feels like progress. You accomplish more tasks, complete more work, generate more output. This creates satisfaction. But productivity doesn't equal wealth unless you own the productive assets. If you're a productive employee, someone else captures most value you create. Wealthy people understand this distinction clearly. They focus on ownership over productivity. They'd rather own somewhat productive asset than be highly productive worker. because ownership captures value automatically. Productivity only generates value while you're actively working. Ownership compounds. Productivity doesn't. Discipline culture rarely discusses this ownership distinction. It focuses on doing more, being better, achieving goals, but it doesn't ask who owns the systems where you're being productive. Who captures the value you create? That question leads to uncomfortable truths about how wealth actually accumulates. The meritocracy myth compounds everything. You're taught that disciplined people rise through merit, that success reflects character, that wealth indicates superior habits. This makes discipline seem like wealth strategy, but it confuses correlation with causation. Wealthy people often have discipline, but they didn't become wealthy through discipline alone. The actual pattern reverses the causation. Wealth enables discipline. When you have financial security, you can maintain routines easily. You're not stressed about survival. You can invest in long-term habits. You have resources to support discipline. So wealth creates conditions for discipline, not the other way around primarily. Poor people often exhibit extraordinary discipline just to survive, working multiple jobs, managing scarcity, sacrificing constantly. This discipline doesn't build wealth, because discipline without capital, without systemic position, without structural advantage, can't generate dynastic wealth. It can improve your situation within constraints, but it can't break structural barriers. There's also the time horizon deception. Discipline advice promises that small daily actions compound over decades into extraordinary results. This is mathematically true for certain activities. Daily exercise compounds into health, daily learning compounds into knowledge. But daily saving doesn't compound into dynastic wealth without other factors. The compounding that creates generational fortunes requires ownership of appreciating assets, political relationships that secure advantages, legal structures that protect accumulation across generations. These aren't things you build through morning routines. They require capital, connections, and systemic positioning that discipline alone cannot provide. Discipline advice often cites examples of individuals who became wealthy through consistent effort, but these examples always omit crucial details. The capital they accessed, the connections they leveraged, the timing that favored their approach, the structural advantages they possessed. The story focuses only on discipline, because that's what sells books to poor people. The regulatory capture mechanism reveals the game clearly. Discipline teaches you to follow rules, but power teaches you to write rules. Wealthy individuals and families don't just comply with regulations. They shape regulations to favor their interests. This happens through political donations, through lobbying, through placing their people in regulatory positions. This regulatory shaping creates permanent advantages. Once regulations favor your business model, competitors struggle to enter your market. Once tax codes advantage your wealth structure, accumulation accelerates. Once legal frameworks protect your assets, wealth compounds across generations. These advantages don't come from discipline, they come from power. Consider how different the advice would be if it addressed reality honestly. Instead of wake at 4 a.m., it would say develop political relationships. Instead of track your habits, it would say study regulatory frameworks. Instead of read success books, it would say understand how wealth concentrates through legal mechanisms. But this advice isn't marketable to mass audience, because mass audience can't implement it. That's the brutal truth discipline advice avoids. Most wealth-building strategies require resources that poor people don't have, significant capital to invest, political connections to leverage, legal expertise to navigate complex structures, time to wait for compounding without survival pressure. These prerequisites eliminate most people from wealth building entirely, so discipline gets sold as substitute. It's something everyone can do. Wake earlier, work harder, focus better. These actions feel achievable. They provide sense of control, they create visible progress, but they don't address structural position, and structural position determines wealth outcomes far more than personal habits. The control illusion is powerful. Discipline makes you feel you're in control of your destiny. You're making choices, building habits, creating results. This autonomy feels good, but it's autonomy within constraints you didn't choose. You're optimizing position within game whose rules you didn't write. True control would mean ability to change the game itself. Wealthy people have that deeper control. They influence policy, shape markets, create legal structures. This isn't discipline, it's power. And power operates completely differently than discipline. Power requires relationships, resources, and positioning that aren't accessible through individual habit formation. There's also the competition misdirection. Discipline culture frames success as individual competition. You're competing against yourself, against other disciplined individuals, trying to be more productive, more focused, more consistent. This competition consumes energy completely. but it's competition within predetermined structure. Meanwhile, wealthy families aren't competing in this game at all. They're playing a different game entirely. They're not trying to be most productive. They're trying to own productive assets. They're not trying to work harder. They're trying to capture systemic advantages. Different game, different rules, different outcomes. The final mechanism is exhaustion. Discipline culture demands constant effort, constant optimization, constant improvement. This exhausts people completely. They're so busy working on themselves that they have no energy left to question systems, no time to study power structures, no capacity to organize collectively. Exhaustion prevents systemic analysis. This exhaustion serves power interests perfectly. Busy, tired people don't revolt. They don't demand systemic change. They just keep trying harder at individual level. Keep hoping discipline will eventually produce breakthrough. Keep believing they're one habit away from success. Meanwhile, structures that concentrate wealth remain untouched. Discipline has value. Real value. It makes you more effective within whatever game you're playing. It helps you accomplish goals, build skills, maintain health. These matter genuinely, but discipline becomes trapped when it's sold as complete wealth strategy, when it substitutes for structural analysis, when it prevents questioning how wealth actually concentrates. The awareness shift requires seeing both levels. Discipline helps individuals improve within structures, but discipline alone cannot overcome structural barriers. Both truths matter. Discipline is valuable and insufficient, part of the picture but not complete. Understanding this changes everything. You can maintain discipline while recognizing limitations. You can build habits while studying power. You can improve individually while questioning systems. You need both, but you need to see clearly. People selling discipline advice often genuinely believe it. They improved through discipline. Their experience is real, but their circumstances included advantages they didn't recognize, capital they took for granted, connections they undervalued. So their advice works for similar positions, not different structural positions. This explains why discipline advice rarely produces breakthrough for poor people. The advice assumes prerequisites poor people lack: financial cushion, time without survival pressure, network access. Without these, discipline improves situation marginally, cannot overcome structural barriers. Wealth building requires different approach, understanding how systems work, how regulations get written, how markets get captured. This knowledge isn't taught in mass market books. It's taught privately within wealthy families, passed down generations, protected from public view. Discipline gets sold publicly while power mechanics stay hidden. Discipline is safe to teach, keeps people focused on individual improvement. Teaching how wealth concentrates, how systems get captured, that threatens everything. So it stays hidden. The choice isn't between discipline or power. Most people never access systemic power. The game is closed, but the choice is being disciplined and blind versus disciplined and aware. Optimizing without understanding versus optimizing while seeing clearly what determines outcomes. Awareness doesn't guarantee wealth, but it prevents wasted effort on strategies that cannot work. Stops you blaming yourself for structural barriers. Helps you see reality. Seeing reality clearly is always better than believing comfortable myths. Even when reality is brutal, truth matters more than comfort.